like, well, why can't I ask this question? Like,
Yep.
what's the big deal? What's the problem? And so usually the adults in the room are the ones that are more so like, but I understand why, because
Right.
if I'm looking at they are associating it, excuse me, with sexuality, with
Mhm.
sex.
All right. So today I have the privilege of speaking with Dana Roberts, who is one half of the founding team of Red Drop, which is a organization that makes menstruation and becoming a woman a little bit more fun. I remember when I first got my period, it was stressful. So we'll talk about that. But how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, of course. So what I've also been doing with the podcast is I've been trying to remind my audience to check in with themselves. So me and my best friend, we have this thing where because life gets busy and we reflexively say, "How are you?" "I'm good," and keep it moving. I like to ask, "How are you?" PMS. So P is physically, M is mentally, and then S is spiritually. So if you can give me like a little something for each, so you can really check in with yourself and remind again the audience to also do the same.
Oh, this is a good one. So excuse me. P physically. I will be very transparent. I am smack dab in the middle of menopause. And so the irony of this is that, starting this work, now you start to see, more celebrities in, who was in my age group having the conversation about menopause. But I think it actually marries to the work that I'm doing now, is that we just didn't talk about it.
Yep.
So I am doing the best that I can every single
Same.
day,
Same.
navigating my changing body.
Yep.
Like, I feel like it changes every day.
Yep. The way I feel you on that, the insomnia that I'm going through right now, I went to sleep at 3 a.m. My body was dead tired, but my brain just could not shut off. And I was reading recently that that is one of the signs and symptoms of perimenopause. So, yeah, girl, I feel you.
You know, but this is a learning lesson for me. I have two daughters who will talk about, um, and I'm like, I can't wait to have these conversations with them, because my mom, and this is not a blame thing at
Hmm.
all, but my mom didn't talk to me about this. I
Yep.
I didn't I just honestly expected a couple of hot flashes here and there,
Right.
because that's what you hear, right?
Mhm.
The jovial, oh, I'm having a hot flash. Oh no, this is way, way worse than just a hot flash.
Yeah.
So yeah, mentally I am doing well. I will say this: therapy is amazing.
Hmm.
I am a strong and staunch advocate for therapy. I have been in therapy for 2 years, and it's just changed my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so mentally, I am doing well. I navigate as it comes.
Yeah.
I use my tools and navigate life as it comes. And spiritually, I think it's actually intertwined with mentally.
Yeah.
Spiritually, this 51-year-old self has come to a very balanced approach in life,
Hmm.
that all will be well.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
will work out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I know that might be a little jarring in the beginning to have you ask and answers kind of personal questions. So thank you so much for humoring me and for being open and transparent. Um, and you make a really good point about the generations before us didn't really talk about these things. And that's one thing that I'm really, really happy about. I love the fact that now we are talking more intergenerationally about what to expect, what we've experienced. And I think just knowing helps us to prepare. Of course, it's not going to replace the experience, but it does help us to know what to expect in every aspect, which is why one of the things that I really love about Red Drop is what you guys are doing. And it's just giving the information and making the transition from young girl into, adolescence a little bit less jarring. So I'd love to know what inspired it. What exactly inspires you to found Red Drop?
Well, selfishly, I will say that I am the mother of 2 daughters.
Mhm,
One is 25 and one is 20.
mhm,
And I was actually thinking about this morning. 15 years ago, my oldest daughter was 10 and
mhm,
she was in 5th grade.
mhm,
And I was teaching at that time a single gender class of 5th grade girls.
mm,
So Sterling was 5th grade at that time.
mhm.
And having a homeroom and a whole class full of girls is a whole, thing. You know what I'm saying? From, you can only imagine, right?
Right, right.
And girls started to start their periods with me. I mean, like right as we started school. And most of those girls had no idea what was happening to them. But what troubled me even more was the reaction of their caretakers. Distraught, tears, literally about to pass out. Um, it was almost like, you know, like almost, and I get it, like you feel like a part of your daughter is, kind of leaving and moving into another phase. And so I looked at my daughter and I was like, oh, no, no, no. Like, no, I'm not going to allow this kind of major responsibility to be on a teacher, a coach, a school nurse, a counselor. And so that is honestly why I started it. And then I realized, like, okay, I am a teacher. I need to ensure that every girl that comes in my person is fine. Like, what would I want to happen for my own daughter? And so that's how it started. So I started creating these little bags called First Purse. And it had everything in there that I thought they needed. They knew where to go get it. And then I started to realize like these products aren't even made for them.
Right.
Um, I feel like my girls and I had a really good rapport, and so they could tell me like, Miss Roberts, this is uncomfortable. What am I supposed to do with this? There was just kind of like, here you go to the bathroom. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? No kind of guidance, nothing. And it just didn't sit well in my spirit. It was just, to me, it was just like, wait a minute, this is too simplistic to be this difficult.
Mhm,
Like, it just doesn't make sense. And so my co-founder, Monica, who is family, she is a serial entrepreneur. And, I went to her and I was like, hey, I got this idea, you know, and she was in the midst of her first startup, which was called Passimals at the time, an amazing brand. What am I trying to say? She innovated or discovered the pacifier with the little stuffed animal attached to it.
Oh.
Yeah, that was her invention. And so literally our family was over there helping her pack like orders, things like that. And I'm like, hey, I got this idea. Let's talk about this idea. And she was looking at me like, you are crazy. Like, I am just trying to manage this. And she, had my niece, and my niece was a baby at that time. Monica is a doctor,
Mhm,
and really she just wasn't vested because Mackenzie was a baby. She
mhm,
couldn't see the long game. And that's a lot of what we do. We can't see, like, it's not that we don't want to see it, it's just that that means so much. Like,
sure.
and so fast forward 10 years, fast forward 10 years, and I was making an impact the way I could.
Mhm,
And then Monica called me one day and she was like, hey, let's talk about that idea. let's talk about it. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it, you know?
Mhm.
And it didn't, also Mackenzie was of coming of age too. So then it was like, oh, wait a minute, let me start
Yeah.
to really have this conversation.
Yeah.
And we just aligned on the fact that there was a missing component of support of intentional products intentionally made for girls in this
Yes.
age group
Yep.
and support for their caretakers. And
Yes.
so that's kind of how it was born. And, and I tell people, like, if you have something, that is deep within you that you feel like is a dream, you just keep on, you just keep pushing. Because Red Drop is literally, when I thought about it today, Red Drop is literally 15 years old in theory, you
Yeah.
know, in a dream, it's 15 years old.
Yeah.
So
So you've said a couple of things that just triggered a couple of thoughts in my mind. Was the one portion that you mentioned is not only do you create products that are, created specifically for the tweens, right? But also to support their caregivers. I think that is the really, that's the missing piece for sure for so many of us, because I think what happens is as we get older and we just are living our lives, we kind of forget. And I'm talking as a mother, and I have to remind myself that I've been on this planet 30 years longer than my kids, right? Than my
mhm.
oldest. So I forget that I have learned these things because I've been here longer. So when we're talking about like menstrual health and just how to take care of yourself when you are first menstruating, we think, oh, well, we've been doing this for so long that why is it so hard for you, or what's there to talk about, right?
Mhm.
So in what ways do you support the caregiver? What information or what type of products do you have available for parents of tweens?
So we have a couple of ways that we support over all of our social platforms. We have education. We usually have a rolling story every single day of, some educational fact or something that aligns with this particular age group starting or on their period journey. The second thing we are growing a YouTube channel that is really designed to give those kind of short, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Like
informational
information.
kind of tidbits.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have an 8-part series that you can purchase from us that is really detailed. It
Mm-hmm.
goes through like every single thing you can think of, from, what is your menstrual cycle all the way to what products should you, consider. How do you talk to your caretaker? And it's also for the tween, like, also, like, how do you tell your caretaker something's wrong? Like,
Mm-hmm.
when is it time to go to the doctor? We have a book that we partnered with Rebel Girls. Um, it's called Growing Up Powerful, and it literally goes through everything about puberty. I love it so much. And that is a little outside just of the menstrual cycle, but it talks about acne and
I
hair
love it.
care and how to pick a bra and things like that. And then we also have a dad series that is very specific to a male caretaker,
Mm-hmm.
kind of walks them through a little slower, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is happening with your the tween in your life. And so those are the ways that we are trying to really support caretakers. From our perspective, like you said, a woman usually remembers their first period, and it's either very traumatic
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
it was fine,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're not forced to kind of relive that experience until it's absolutely time,
Yeah.
you know, um, and that's kind of how it's like you don't really think about it until you got to think about it, and
Mm-hmm.
usually you think about it because you're having to provide some care for someone in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I remember my first period. Thank goodness it was over the summertime, so I didn't have issues that my friends have had where they've gotten in the middle of class, stained themselves, and all those things. But I remember waking up and I went to the bathroom. And I was just like, Grandma, something's not right. And she comes in the bathroom and she's just like, it's your period. It's okay. And I was just like, well, I don't feel well. She's like, all right, well, this is what you do. And this is how you clean yourself. And then you just go. But yeah, it was still scary because I remember I was 11. And I think about now, my oldest is in fourth grade. And he was telling me last year, while he was in third grade, that one of his friends had her period because he had all these questions about what's a period? Do you get a period? Like, what it's all about? Because such and such has her period. And so I
Mhm.
walked him through it. And because it's really important for me that he is supportive and does not make anybody feel a way about something that is natural. Like, we get periods every month. Like, that's it.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, a lot of us have stories about things that have gone wrong. And you were mentioning how one of your inspirations was you don't want the onus to be on the teachers and the coaches and things. And I remember I was an athlete and I did not know how to insert a tampon. It was my coach who had to like walk me through it because the pad just
Mhm.
wasn't working for soccer at that time. And
Mhm.
I just love that you have information for tweens and for the caretakers on how to talk about uncomfortable things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it shouldn't be uncomfortable, right? So that's the first thing that, we really want to drive home, that there is no shame associated with this. This is a
Yeah.
natural bodily function.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially, and I would say society, but I always am very transparent that I look at, my people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black and brown people. And, I grew up, I'm from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
My mother is from Mobile. I mean, we are the most southern that you can get, right? And periods are often sexualized,
Yes.
and so I remember starting my period, which was fine. I was prepared, I was at school, no problem. And then my grandmother was like, oh, but you can have a baby now. And I was like, lady, what are you talking about?
Right.
I just started a period. I'm trying to figure out what the period is.
Right. Right.
And that has kind of fostered generational discomfort and
Yes.
shame. And it shouldn't. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I'm so proud of the fact that your son is asking these questions, because he's gonna have a friend, a female friend, maybe a wife, a girlfriend, whatever, and she's going to have a period.
Yep.
And I often say, like, hey, we should be having these real conversations with boys just as we have with girls at the
Mm-hmm.
same time.
Yeah.
Because kind of think about what men we would be raising,
Yes.
the
Yes.
empathetic, informed man,
Yeah.
if they knew these things.
Yeah, from early on. And
Yeah.
yeah, and to piggyback off of what you're saying, the reason that it's uncomfortable is because, like you said, it was sexualized, right?
Mhm.
To further my period story, so that I got my period in July. That summer was the hardest summer of my life because my parents are from the Caribbean. So my grandmother
Wow.
was just like, okay, so now you're a woman, you need to know how to take care of your own household. So it was wife boot camp. Like, I learned to cook, to sew. Like, I could not sleep in. I was up. She woke up before the sun came up. I was up with her, like doing all the chores and learning how to take care of my own household one day. So
Mm,
I think that is also,
yeah.
to your point, what makes it like, oh, like, what does this mean about me? I don't want to talk to you about these things. If you think I'm a woman, I'm 11. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
approach things with you. And the way that I raise my two boys now is one of the things that I learned early on from my mother-in-law was do not give genitals any special names. Like, they are part of the human anatomy. Call things what they are. And that, for me, started to normalize things about our bodies that are completely normal. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing weird about bodies and what they do, including the periods. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to stop it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, it's just as simple as that. And and it is cultural, I would say it does cross over cultural lines, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, but at this moment, I'm 51, I have a 25-year-old. I mean, if she decides to have a child, she should definitely be able to impact her daughter differently.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that I do say is that this is my deepest desire with Red Drop is to change generations, like
Yeah.
to impact generations to come. Because it's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. And girls, we do different, educational events, face-to-face events. And I will tell you, I do believe that it is changing. Like girls are very, I would say avant-garde. Like they ask questions, they raise their hands. And I do believe it's because they have this onslaught of information,
Mm-hmm.
that social media, they have it right there in their faces. And they're not afraid to have these courageous,
Mm-hmm.
this courageous candor. It's like, well, why can't I ask this question? Like,
Yep.
what's the big deal? What's the problem? And so usually the adults in the room are the ones that are more so like, but I understand why, because
Right.
if I'm looking at they are associating it, excuse me, with sexuality, with
Mm-hmm.
sex,
Mm-hmm.
with the act of having a baby, and that's not what we should be doing.
Yeah. But I will say too, I think even the conversation around later on, whenever maybe the child asks about sex, I think that's also really important to make them feel comfortable talking about sex. A couple months ago, my oldest also had some questions about sex, like what exactly is sex? Is this how babies are made? Like, tell me more about it. And I did not want to have the conversation. We were on the way to school, but I'm just like, all right, let's just talk about it because I
Mhm.
want to, you're coming to me with it. I think it's important for later on for me, for him, whenever he maybe decides to explore that later on, much later, hopefully, that he'll feel
Mhm.
comfortable speaking to me and his dad about it. So I think we have work to do, but yeah.
Yeah, and I often, what I said, I was in Charlotte last week and talking to some girls and moms, and I said, hey, I said, if your daughter doesn't have an issue with saying vagina,
Mm-hmm.
if your daughter doesn't have an issue with saying breast, like if she knows her body, she knows her anatomy, guess what? You're building her level of advocacy for herself.
Mm-hmm.
So you are saying, like, you are allowing her to say, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is my personal temple. Like you are not allowed to be within
Yes.
my my
Yes.
bubble, like all of these things. And I think I think that too changes the dynamic of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because I can just tell you, for me, that wasn't the conversation when I was younger.
Same.
And so I said, hey, like, let's start having these conversations as much as we want to talk about, unfortunately, sexual predators,
Mm-hmm.
human trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. It starts with this conversation right here. Like, this
Truly.
is precious. This, you do not have agency
Mm-hmm.
to touch my body in
Mm-hmm.
any shape, form, or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so destigmatizing, the fact that you're going to have a period is the first start of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And it does end up into the conversation of, well, why does this, egg, if this egg is fertilized, okay, well, fertilization means that you had sex,
Mm-hmm.
that a sperm fertilizes the egg and then you're pregnant. Okay, fine. Let's have that conversation too.
Right.
Then, but it's okay. And we still have a way to go with that part of the conversation. And
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I think what you guys are doing at Red Drop really is important because information is so powerful. If I can name things, if I know some things, I can make some sense of it, and then I can ask more questions. And I know, I think this is just powerful in my own self advocacy as a young person, like you said.
and
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I was
No,
gonna say, and the fact that your son asked you those questions is so powerful to me, because what you don't want is you don't want him to get that information from his peers. You don't want him to get that information from Google.
yes,
You want to be the first line of information, trusted information for your children.
yes.
you know um and even I would say, while I love my former profession as a teacher, as an administrator, still people have their own personal biases, you know what I'm
Truly.
saying? So it's like if you're if you're depending on me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as a teacher, as a school nurse, I have school nurses now who I'm still trying to say, like, hey, these girls deserve products that are made for them. Well, why? They could just use what we used. Well, that wasn't good for you either. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And so if you depend on another person to have that conversation, then you're allowing them to bring in their own personal,
Yep.
ideas of what the conversation should be.
Yes.
And I mean, I applaud you. I'm so proud of him just because he's an inquirer. It's like, hey,
Very
like
much.
the question. Yeah.
Very much. And speaking of Google, like I know the type of person he is. If I don't give him an immediate answer, if I'm busy with something and I don't give him an immediate answer, he's gonna go Google. And I do not want him Googling that. Do
Yep.
not disturb.
Yep.
I do not want him Googling that. So it's super important for me to just give him all that I can give him in terms of information. And I just didn't get that. So I want to give him things that I didn't have access to, which is just an open relationship to talk about any of the things, with my parent. Cause I remember learning things that I had no business learning and wrong information as well in middle school and in high school from my peers. Cause we all didn't know anything, but we were trying to teach other all types of madness. So
Yeah.
yeah. um, Trying to avoid that if I can. And yeah, kids will be kids, but I'm trying my best to be the most influential in his life
Yes.
while I can. I've been reading statistics about how I think between the ages, I think 10 and 13, their peers are the most influential. And that is scary. But
Yeah, and you know what? So 67% of girls start their periods at school.
mm-hmm,
So if you haven't prepared her and she doesn't have a particular kinship or a closeness with one of her teachers, or if she doesn't trust her teacher, she doesn't trust her school nurse.
mm-hmm,
We've had a lot of girls to say to us, "Oh, I found red drop because my one of my friends gave me one of your pads."
nice.
So that lets you know that they're going to their peers.
Yep.
Like they're going to say like, "Hey, what do you do? I just started my period. Like, what should I do? What should I use?" And if most of the girls are starting their period at school, then you better have them prepared for how you feel is best for, your own child because they're
Yeah.
asking their peers.
Yes, for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
And going back to the actual products that you provide. So what makes the red drop products different than, let's say, like the typical that product that we'll find for adults that are made with adults in mind, I should say.
Yeah, so most adult pads are, the sizing is different. Um, what we hear is that, well, there are teen pads in the store. Well, your teen pad it's marketed as a teen pad, but it's a size 1 women's pad.
Mm,
So that's all it is.
mm-hmm,
And so for us, what we did is that we have tween and teen pads that are um smaller but hold just as much flow. So our typical everyday pad, excuse me, you would think in adult women's terms is a panty liner.
mm-hmm,
And it very well could be for you, but it for her, it holds up to 4 tampons of flow. So she's going to be fine.
mm-hmm.
It has more adhesive, so it won't shift during soccer
Oh,
or
the
during
best.
recess.
Mm-hmm,
It has an odor wicking because they're still learning,
mm-hmm,
right? How
mm-hmm,
to clean their body, how to the hygiene of their whole body.
mm-hmm.
And so we have 4 different sizes, and 4 different types of flows for, a maximum, a night, what we recommend for night, what we recommend for day, and what we recommend for every day. And the everyday is more so like we say like, hey, when you start seeing those signs, breast budding, pubic hair, some discharge, let's start teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we don't say like you have to do this every day, but she should have this everyday liner. She should start
Mm-hmm.
learn to do proper pad placement.
Yeah.
Most of your embarrassing situations, are often because they don't know how to even put the pad on correctly.
Yep.
And so we have those, we have hygiene wipes, just aloe and water. And we have period panties, which is the new rave. Didn't grow up in a time with period panties.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my daughters love them, and they were actually kind of our guinea pigs. My two daughters and my niece, we were like, hey, like there's so many different size styles, how you can do it. And so we kind of took them through the test and landed on the ones that we have, and they love them. I personally could never, I don't think I would like them. I don't have I've had a hysterectomy, so I don't have a period anymore. But it's amazing for pad placement because what it does is that if you partner that with a pad,
Mm-hmm.
then your girl is less likely and should not have, a leak or an embarrassing,
Moment. Yeah.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we're moving into soon tampons, tween
Mm-hmm.
size tampons,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully soon some good menstrual cups, which
Ooh.
my 25-year-old actually advocated for.
Mm-hmm.
She loves menstrual cups. She actually does the disc as well. I'm just telling all her business out here. I hope she's okay with it. But but and so we just want to be the brand for tweens and teens to at least find what is good for them. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a pad, it doesn't have to be a tampon, it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be, it doesn't matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's good for you, we're okay with that. So that's we're trying to build this unicorn out. So
I
yeah.
love it. I think that's incredible because I have not seen a menstrual company or that is tween first. I've seen companies add on later on, but like they don't start off specifically with the tween and teen in mind. I think it's awesome.
Well, I think that speaks to, it's so funny. We were talking about that this week, and I think it speaks to a lot. If you
Our
just you
culture.
really yeah, it
Mhm.
speaks to people thinking that girls are little women, and they're not.
Hmm.
They're girls. They,
Yeah.
children are not little adults.
Yeah.
Children.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, just like you said, that you have these major, conglomerates. Like you
Hmm.
have these major, and I don't want to, uh, show my hand, but you have these major companies that have been doing this historically for 50, 60 years, making feminine hygiene products.
Hmm.
And they have not invested the money, the resources into research, into innovation,
Hmm.
into thinking like, wait a minute, every girl's gonna start their period. Like this isn't going anywhere.
Hmm.
6,000 girls a day in the US alone start their period.
Wow.
But the thought process is just give them what we've already made.
Right, right. Because, it costs to research and innovate, so that's going to chip into their bottom line. And I think that's nothing that sets you guys apart is that you're vision led. Like there is something more that is leading you to this work. It's not just about how much can you make from this, right? And I
Right.
think our traditional companies that have been around for 50, 60 years, at this point, it's just, okay, this is a cash cow because we're going to menstruate, right? And
Right. They haven't
yeah.
had to. They know that
Hmm.
it is an essential product,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, we haven't demanded as
True.
well.
True.
And so now you're starting to see, a shift all across the board with just the higher kind of attention and advocacy within the menstrual hygiene space, which is great. It's enough space for everyone,
Mhm.
for everyone to find, what works for them. And we're just really honored to be able to lead the conversations about tweens, like,
Mhm.
because I just am a real staunch believer that how a girl starts their period is really going to drive like how they feel about their body, how they grow into themselves. And I'm just like, and how they elevate their advocacy,
Mhm.
especially black and brown girls, when you're more focused. I mean, you're more susceptible to like systemic healthcare racism.
Mhm.
You can't have this conversation with your doctor without like trying to convince them, that something might
Yeah.
be wrong.
Yeah.
And so if we start off right,
That's
we
true.
start off with good information, with good products, and empowering them, then I feel like we are going to raise a generation of women to say, no, 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 no. Something
Yeah.
doesn't feel right. I'm in childbirth. Something doesn't feel right, and I
Yeah.
need you to address it.
Yeah.
You know,
Provides
um,
a solid foundation. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh, so much to think about. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think this conversation is going to be really, really helpful to mothers, to other caretakers of our children. I think to your point in the beginning of the conversation, we don't think about this until we're met with it. Like, oh, she's menstruating now. Now, what do we do? But I think these
Mhm.
conversations should be had and be thought about even before. And even if whether or not you are even a parent or caregiver, like it's a community to raise children, and I think we can have these conversations much earlier to provide that solid foundation for our young girls. Thank you
And I
so much.
think what
Yeah.
you elevate is so, you know what, is this conversation and just your experience with your boys. Like, to me, and this is the first time like I've been able to have this conversation with a caretaker who has boys, who's like really said like, I'm really being very intentional about how I educate my sons.
Mhm.
And, I think that is also a very, very important part
Yeah.
of this whole overall conversation, that everybody has a part to play, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you for that. You're
No
raising good
problem.
men.
I'm trying so hard. My husband was raised by a good woman, and she taught me so much just being in her presence about how to raise and speak to boys so that they can be empathetic and supporting and kind to women. Like there's nothing uncomfortable about the human body. And I want my boys to have the same feeling like,
Mhm.
okay, we're human. This is it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Um,
good job, mama.
I'm trying. I'm trying. All right. So this conversation has been so, so good. And honestly, I could talk to you for like another like 10 hours. There's so much to talk about. I think this scratches the surface about so many other things that this interconnects with.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you so much for your time. But before we wrap up, where can the people find a Red Drop? Where can they buy their kits?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website, which is tryreddrop.com, and we are also on Amazon.
Mhm.
We are also featured on the Girl Scouts shop page as well. And yeah, I mean, that's where we are. We are hopefully soon in a store near you. We're dreaming big and bigger. So yeah, I appreciate the question.
I see it coming. I see it coming. I see this in my local favorite places right now is Target. I see it in my Target. So I'm hoping that for you, that and more. And I will drop all the links of where to purchase down below in the show notes. That way it's an easy click for you to go ahead and buy, support, support not only Red Drop, but also support the young girl in your life. Thank you
Absolutely.
again. Thanks so
Thank
much,
you
Dana.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.